Alright, so now we've found the distance between 2 points. So the next logical step in any application would be, well, what's the halfway point, right? What's the midpoint between, because we did middle in one set cases, those were the mean and median, right? Mean was the average. The median was the middlemost value in a data set. And so now we're going to be finding the midpoint in my distance, right? The distance between 2 points, what's the middle value? What's the midpoint, the halfway point between the 2 points? And so the formula is, well, you find the halfway point between the x values and you find the halfway point between the y values, and there's the midpoint. And so you've got your first point, so this would be point 1, this would be point 2, and so the picture is probably the easiest way to look at it. The total blue line, right, would be the total distance here. This would be the halfway point, right in the middle, and you find that by finding the halfway point in the x direction and the halfway point in the y direction. And so what you do is and what you can't confuse this with the distance formula, is the distance formula found the difference between the x and y values, subtract 10. The midpoint finds the average of the x and y values, so you add them. So you take your x values, add them together, divide by 2. You take your y values, add them together, divide by 2. It's the midpoint, it's the average between the x values, the average between the y values. Alright, and so this is the midpoint. So we're going to look at two examples. We're going to do just a generic find a midpoint, and then I'm going to look at an application type. Alright, so I want to find the midpoint between the lines connecting the points -2, 3, and -4, 8. Alright, so this would be my point 1, so this would be x1, y1. This would be x2, y2. And again, doesn't really matter as long as, actually this one doesn't really matter at all, as long as you add the x values together and add the y values together. And so my midpoint would be adding my x values, so my -2 plus my -4, and dividing by 2. My y values would be adding the y values, 3 plus 8, divide by 2. Right, and simplify, right? Simplify the top part first, so here's going to simplify to -6 over 2. Here it's going to divide or add 3 and 8 to get 11 over 2. Simplify that. You could leave the fraction 11 over 2, or you could write the decimal, so it's up to you. So -6 divided by 2 simplifies to -3, and it's up to you if you want to leave 11 over 2 or you want to simplify that to the decimal 5.5. Either is fine, but this would be the midpoint between those 2 points. If I connected those points, this is the halfway. Halfway between the point -2, 3 and the point -4, 8. If you graphed them, that would be this point between the two. I connect the dots, and this would be the halfway point. Application type. Application part. Sometimes with application, it's just the wording and the notation gets in our way. And so what you have to think of is what's the x part and what's the y part, and what are we looking for. So suppose that we know the world population in 1874 was 1.24 billion. It's projected by 2050, the number is expected to be 9 billion, right, the world population. Using the midpoint, estimate the world population in 1962. 1962 is the halfway point between 1874 and 2050. Right, just to kind of compare what our estimation will be, it actually was 3.14 billion in 1962. So we want to think about it. The x values are the time. Right, what time it is depends, right? The population size depended on what year I'm in. What year was I in, and how big was the world population? So y is the population, which depends on in billions, what time I pick. And so I do have 2 points here. I have the point 1874 paired with 1.24 billion people, and I've got a second point, the projection 2050, paired with 9 billion. Again, that's a good guess, an estimation. And so what we're looking for is the midway point. Well, I'm still going to use my x1, x2 divided by 2, my y1, y2 divided by 2. We already know what this is, but I'm going to show you that it is 1962. And then this is the one that's going to answer my question, right? This is the one we're looking for that'll answer my question. Okay, so filling that out, I've got my 1874 plus my 2050 divided by 2 in my x spot, and then my y spot. I've got my 1.24 billion plus my 9 billion divided by 2. And then simplify those. And so if you simplify this, and if you type it all out on the calculator, which I'll do, you add those, divide by 2, and that does come out to 1962, which they already told you that's the year we're the midpoint, right? 1962 is halfway between 2050 and 1874. Right, well, what was the population halfway between based on our numbers? Well, I add the population number in 1974 to 250, so I would get 10.24 divided by 2, and that comes out to 5.12. Right, and so that's the answer we're looking for. If we use the midpoint, the estimated world population in 1964 is estimated, or it's estimated, to be 5.12 billion people. And it's important to put the billion, right? 5.12 is very different than 5.12 billion. So make sure you put the billion, right? Units matter. And so if we just used our midpoint as an estimation, it was estimated based on our numbers that 5.12 billion people should have been in the population in 1962, which actually is not completely right? It's off by 2 billion, but again, it was an estimation. Not only is it an estimation based on midpoints, but it's also it's an estimation based on an expectation. So the number being off is not surprising because it's based off an expectation, right? And it's also based on an average, a middle value. Right? But that's an example of a midpoint in an application. Right, so we will stop there, and next we're going to look at circles. All right, so circles is the last thing from 1.2 that we're going to look at.